This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I'm your host, Vito, Jerome Chirco, along to my usual partner in crime and sidekick, that is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
That's right.
I'm here, Vito. You know something? Sometimes when you're so invested in a project, you think about the big things first, like how do we get more numbers? How do we get more sponsors? How do we get more people to credential us? And so when you're thinking like that, sometimes you forget the small stuff. And so yesterday, I'm just sitting around, the office a little bit, just kind of thinking about the project and how much fun it's been and where we're taking this thing. And I just looked at my cell phone and I saw the connection to the mixer and I saw the computer just sitting there and a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, wait a minute, why isn't my Mac connected to the mixer? And I know we got other gadgets so that we can take calls live and do simulcasts and all, the techie type stuff. But I sit here and I tell myself, look, I'm a psychologist. I learned about the audio side basically by myself. And I basically overlooked the most easy thing in terms of connecting a computer to an audio mixer. And with that, I just connected it and was like, wait a minute, I could unlock or unleash literally thousands of drops. And I did it, and I'm excited, and I get to even, express my creativity in much more ways, playing YouTube videos and adding clips to the shows that we do. And Vito, I can't believe that I was thinking so much about the big stuff that I overlooked something so simple as to the creative stuff that I could do with a computer connected to a mixer. And it's so funny, but hey, I get a chance today to talk to you about baseball, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you for not honking the horn and giving me the finger in the parking lot, because I know you saw the construction as the parking lot's getting tore up. I appreciate that, but dude, you're so nice. I literally saw you behind me, and then I said to myself, I'm just going to drive 2 miles an hour and see if Vito will honk at me, and I literally was like putting on my blinker. I hit the brake a couple times, and you just kind of were just going with the flow. You're a really nice guy, dude. Usually other people would honk.
Thank you. You should already know that I'm a nice guy, okay? But yeah, I'm a little bit lackadaisical when it comes to that kind of stuff with honking, my horn when I probably should be, because I have had an incident happen to me, to my car, where I had somebody back right into my vehicle in the parking lot of a Bank of America in Southfield. And I didn't do anything about it. I didn't honk my horn, and I should have. And it led to that. A lot of that kind of noise, and not good stuff for me and my vehicle, too.
A crash, right?
Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. It was my first accident, my only accident, knock on wood, so far that I can say, attached to my name, attached to a vehicle, belonging to my name. So I've been pretty good with my driving. I'm a safe driver, lackadaisical at times, and don't take the initiative when I probably should with honking my horn when somebody is doing what you were doing in the parking lot before the start of this very podcast, Doc.
So, Vito, this is the Tigers Talk podcast. I only got one question for you.
What up, biatch?
What are we talking about today, sir?
Well, we got to talk about, how about Matthew Boyd throwing behind Miguel Sano? We got to talk about that. The lackluster series against the Rays to start off in Tampa, and then against the Twinkies winning 2 out of 3. And a series that I thought would be tougher, Doc, for the Tigers than going up against the Rays. 3 in Tampa, where they looked lackluster, didn't perform well enough, and got swept, as I said. And the Rays brought their bats out, and nobody saw that coming either.
Let's start with the series versus Tampa Bay. You lose 3 games, you get swept. How much do you blame the outfield and the difficulties of playing outfield in that stadium in Tampa Bay? Because obviously Jacoby Jones and some of the outfielders don't have enough experience playing in that outfield, and balls were lost. The Tigers' defense was deplorable. Even Brad Ausmus came out on his own and said, in my stint here in Detroit, managing the Tigers, that was the worst defensive series that he'd ever seen. And you saw errors all over the place. How much blame do you assign the Tigers playing in that stadium? Do you give them blame, or do you say, you know what, it's a tough building to play in, it's a tough ballpark, and you just, you take the sweep and you just move on?
It's tough to play in that ballpark because of the ceiling and that to deal with at Tropicana Field in Tampa. Thing is, though, they're still major leaguers. You have to adjust eventually. But right now, they're not the most well-equipped in the outfield. Their center field position is going to be a problem, maybe a disaster / dumpster fire all year long, and defensively at times as well. But in defense of the Tigers, we saw Kevin Kiermaier, the center fielder of the Rays, misjudge a ball badly. A line drive go right past him. He's a guy that won a Gold Glove for his effort defensively last year. Remember that. So if he's making a mishap, not judging a ball the right way off the bat and letting a ball go all the way past him to the wall at Tropicana Field, well, then it is tough to play there. And the lights, the ceiling, that Tropicana, the roof there, it is hard to judge a ball with that roof taken into account. So for the Tigers outfielders who aren't as well accustomed to that, well, they're not going to be well adjusted to it. But at a certain point, too, you want those outfielders who are major league outfielders to make plays, to make the routine plays. And if they're not, then it is at least 50% of the blame has to be placed upon the shoulders of the Tigers outfielders, with that being taken into account.
Now at the time of this recording, the Tigers are sitting at 10-8. They're still in first place in the AL Central. When the Tigers lose 4 games like they did last week, did you get a little bit nervous? Did you say to yourself, oh boy, here are some more problems that are revealing themselves? Because the way I kind of looked at it was, you said, wow, they got off to a decent start being 8-4. Then they go out to Tampa Bay and they play a series like that where basically everything fell apart. The injuries started to mount up. And you say to yourself, oh boy, is this the bottom falling out of this organization? Or is this ball club now revealing that there are too many weaknesses to overcome? But then they come back with 2 strong wins at Minnesota, and you say to yourself, okay, good. You lost the first game versus Minnesota, but you come back and you battle and you grind, and there are still some positives to look at with the additions of the young players from Toledo, with some pitchers that are grinding, and with the addition of some talent in that bullpen that we will talk about. But how concerned were you last week when they had that 4-game losing streak? Were you angry? Were you pissed? Or were you like, you know what? It's a long season. These type of things are going to happen and might as well have it happen early in the year as opposed to late in the year when you're battling for a division title.
Vito Chirco doesn't get pissed ever, Doc. Remember that, okay? And
Really?
All my listeners out there. Oh, yeah, really, it is true. I like that little drop there, Doc. And it's a marathon of a season, too. It's 162 games a regular season. So with it being what I said, describing it as a marathon, as it really is, you can't overreact to any particular period of time in a regular season unless you're late in the season in the last month. And I'll say it once again, I said it, I think, on last week's episode. The 40-game mark in a season is really the biggest indicator of where your team might be headed in a particular season. Once you see what the record is after those first 40 games of the season, you can kind of tell, well, is this team for real, a true contender, or a true pretender? So there is that to remember as well and to take into account, Doc.
Now, I don't want to put any fear in you, but I'm looking right now at the May schedule. Oh my goodness, it's a little bit daunting, and it's a big month for them. They could literally, really set themselves apart or really find themselves in a hole because you do play an early month series versus the Cleveland Indians, 4 games versus the Indians early May. So next week, we'll have a little bit better sense of where they're at after a couple series versus the Seattle Mariners and the Chicago White Sox. But I understand that, you probably keep a level head. But for me, I started to look at it and I said, oh my goodness, these 4 games might be indicative of a much more serious problem. And one of the biggest warts that you're starting to see, and I guess we have to talk about it and put it on the table, is that you cannot have a pitcher that's making $16.5 million, owed potentially $5 more million, $21 million on the hook for Anibal Sanchez that he's going to be owed whether you have him on your team or not, because it would cost about $5 million to buy him out. And you look at it and you say, you cannot have a bullpen reliever just taking up a spot. On Sunday, in the series finale versus Minnesota, you had a massive lead. You didn't need to put in Justin Wilson. You could have let him rest on Sunday and then subsequently utilize a day off on the 24th, that Monday. But no, Anibal Sanchez comes in, gives up another home run, which then forces Brad Ausmus to bring in Anibal Sanchez. And you've talked about it. Everybody's looking at it. Many people are shocked that across the newswire, he hasn't been DFA'd yet. But you can't progress throughout this season with Anibal Sanchez in your bullpen. And I know everyone talks about him being a nice guy. They talk about the accolades that he had in the past. But unfortunately, when you pay a pitcher that much money, at some point, when he ages, you realize his skills are going to erode. I don't see a situation with Anibal Sanchez where I look at it and I say, he's going to come back. I feel like it's a lost cause, and having him on the team is a detriment. You have to look to the minors, or you have to look to not letting him play and impact your team negatively. Using Justin Wilson on Sunday was totally uncalled for. You had to bring him out there because Anibal Sanchez couldn't get outs.
At least they had a day off, though, on Monday of this past week. Now, maybe Ausmus was using that mentality or that reason for why he placed Justin Wilson in that ball game when it was a blowout and not a high-leverage situation, as Justin Wilson, Alex Wilson, those two relief pitchers in the Tigers' pen should be always used in high-leverage situations, never when the game is far out of reach, as it was when Anibal Sanchez was utilized by Ausmus, who is a Mr. Nice Guy, a great clubhouse veteran presence. But at a certain point, it's enough being Mr. Nice Guy or worrying about that factor and that Sanchez is truly a nice guy. What does it matter at this point when he's not getting outs, not effective whatsoever, is irrelevant? And the last time he was truly relevant was guess when, Doc?
2 years ago?
Well, really, 2014 and 2013 he was the American League ERA leader. That was his last really great season. 2014, he was solid. Good enough. But the thing is, now 2 straight years before this season where he was irrelevant, not getting outs effectively or consistently every 5th day, or even in bullpen situations when used out of the pen, I'm saying. So now he's a long reliever who's used in blowout situations when the game is far out of reach. He can't even be productive in those situations right now, Doc. What that tells me, it tells me his time is done and or should be done, as his best days are far behind him. And how many days or episodes of this podcast have we talked about that regarding Sanchez? That his best days are not only behind him, Doc, but far behind him. So why not cut ties while it's early in the season? And right now, you can say they're winning in spite of Anibal Sanchez. They have up to this point. And luckily, he's being used in those blowout, the lowest of low leverage situations, because there's no way he could be used in a high leverage situation at this point. And him recovering to become that effective reliever that can be used in high leverage situations, I don't think that's a possibility at this juncture in Anibal Sanchez's big league career.
Yeah, Vito, it's very unfortunate because the Tigers need guys that can get to the Wilsons and K-Rod. Those 3 guys are okay. K-Rod is still a player and still a pitcher that many people are questioning regarding the fact that he puts guys on base. He doesn't make it easy in terms of, his performances when he's called upon. But he still has 6 saves at the time of this recording. So K-Rod is doing his job. It's just that people, when they see him, they get very nervous because he doesn't have real stuff. K-Rod's stuff is hittable in several key situations, and so many people are concerned with that. But in terms of Anibal Sanchez, I think you and I can agree that his involvement with the squad is hurting them much more than his value brings. But it's just hard to write a check for $21 million on top of already, I believe, the $13.5 million they've already paid out to Lowe and Pelfrey. You can't just give up that much money and write checks galore, when your boss is, looking at how much money is coming in versus how much is going out. Writing a check for $21 million for a guy to go away is super tough. But do you think Anibal would accept an assignment to the minors, maybe work on his stuff for 30, 45 days, and maybe get it right so that by the All-Star break, if he is needed, if he has some long-term success in the minors, do you think he would accept that assignment in an effort to kind of, get a career resurgence? Because at the major league level, you don't have time or you don't have the resources in order to work on things, to go as much in the film room as you do in the minors. It just screams that if you're not going to cut Anibal Sanchez, stick him in the minors.
He would be an addition by subtraction, getting rid of him at this point. And the thing is, too, if you do part ways with Anibal Sanchez right now, he would have to go through waivers. I think he would clear waivers, which means
no doubt about it.
He would be given the chance to choose an assignment in AAA Toledo. And I think he'd be forced to. I think his hands would be tied because he would have no other option. What other Major League ball club right now would want Anibal Sanchez on their ball club if they're truly trying to win this season? If you're trying to win in 2017, Doc, as the Tigers are too, it makes no sense whatsoever to keep him on your Major League roster. So you cut him, you let him go through waivers, and then guess what? He won't be picked up by anybody, which means that he will be given the option to choose an assignment at AAA Toledo. And I think at that point, if he wants to continue his Major League career, to have a chance at continuing his Major League career, he will choose that assignment in AAA Toledo. I think he will be forced to. And I think because of that, because it is his only true option to try to continue his Major League career, he will choose that option.
So Brad Ausmus calls in Anibal Sanchez.
We need to talk.
Listen, Anibal, I understand that everyone likes you. We greatly appreciate your time here in Detroit, but we got to get this right. You got to send your ass down to the minors. Listen, we're going to put you on waivers. We think there's a strong chance you're going to clear waivers. We want you in the organization. We want to get you right. We don't want to just let you go. You know, you were a valuable member of the team. We think that with some work in the minors, we think in 60 days we can bring you up. Think that'll fly?
Well, you just got to tell him the truth. Facts are facts at this point. He's not getting it done at the major league level. So I think he realizes, too, that the writing's on the wall, that his career is on the downside, and that he has to go through that in order to try to continue his major league career. So I think he'll have to listen to those words of Brad Ausmus, if those are truly the words of Brad Ausmus, which they won't be. We know that much because you're the one that is projecting Ausmus to say those words. But anyways.
He might be angry.
You fucked up.
You bring him in, and you're like, listen, Anibal.
You fucked up. Fucked up!
He might give you an Al Pacino line, huh?
Like, listen, unfortunately, Anibal, you're killing me. You're killing the team. You're going to get my ass fired. See you later. We got to let you go. That's it.
But you know what really might get him fired is him, Ausmus said, is continuing to use K-Rod as his ninth inning guy. He should not be the designated closer every single game when there is that lead for the Tigers. You know, the situation to put him in the ninth to close out the game when he is readily available. K-Rod right now should not be that designated closer, nor should anybody on the Tigers roster. There is no need for a designated closer. And that's because of sabermetrics. When you look at the analytics, the numbers, really dive deep into those numbers, you will see that there's no need for a closer in today's game. And I'm saying that those closers should be replaced with high leverage relief pitchers, guys that can be used in high leverage situations, whether it be the 7th inning, the 8th inning, or the 9th inning. And when it is the 9th inning, instead of using K-Rod, how about Justin Wilson or Alex Wilson? I have begged on this podcast for how long now about Ausmus going down that route to improve the pen and to improve the quality of the pen and its productivity in high leverage situations. When the game is truly on the line, when there's a 1 or 2 run lead or a tied ball game, instead of using K-Rod, who has proven to be ineffective thus far this season, use the likes of J. Wilson and A. Wilson. Why not? Why the hell not? At this point, is what I'm asking of you, Doc, as a fan, as a pundit, and to all those fans out there. And I am specifically asking, kind of begging Brad Ausmus to consider that option as well.
No, of course not.
And that's probably what he would say to me because he is a traditional old school manager that still applies those old school principles.
Vito, I think what everyone's looking at is the effectiveness of Justin Wilson. So many people are wondering, like, okay, K-Rod in the past has kind of switched from the closer position and been utilized as a setup man in Milwaukee. Now, it was kind of up and down results in that he kind of had early success with Milwaukee and then it kind of faded out. But with K-Rod, I think the better spot potentially to use him in is in lower leverage situations in the 8th inning. Try to use Alex Wilson in the 7th, K-Rod in the 8th, and Justin Wilson with his stuff because he has good stuff. He's got a good fastball. He pitches to contact. And the fact of the matter is, he's the guy that I think is best suited to be the closer. Now, you could say, based upon sabermetrics, that you don't have to have a set closer. But this is not a situation where you can really afford to experiment. Only a handful of guys, 1 or 2 more, were asking to contribute. And I think Jimenez can be that guy. And I'll talk to you about a situation in which Ausmus used Jimenez that might have hurt his confidence, but I don't think so, but I definitely want to talk to you about it. But I think Jimenez, with more reps, with more opportunities to get into the game, could be another guy that can be utilized to get innings, to get outs.
But you just said don't experiment mid-season. You would be experimenting with Jimenez.
How are you experimenting? I think
because you got to give him more reps to prove that he's quality enough to be used in high leverage situations,
Why
right?
do you think they brought him up
You would be
again?
experimenting, though, mid-season. And if they want to win right now, right, you don't want to toy around with that.
Unfortunately, the injury to Iglesias resulted in Jimenez coming up. And he was utilized, when Justin Verlander started walking everybody and his performance went south. So you bring in Jimenez in a very high leverage situation when in weeks past you've said, listen, we're going to try to ease him into, the season. and we're going to, try our best to build his confidence and utilize him in situations where he can kind of get some outs. Then boom, fast forward to his second go-around with the Tigers, and Justin Verlander's thinking it up, runners on base, and Jimenez made a big mistake, and he learned, I think, a lesson in that you can't just throw fastballs by major league hitters. They can hit them. And, he was subsequently brought on in the series versus Minnesota and did the job. But I do believe Jimenez, with more reps, can be used as one of those pitchers in situations, maybe not super high leverage, but maybe a runner on and, 1 or 2 run lead. You can do some things with Jimenez. He could be that guy. But no, nobody here at the network's calling him a savior, but Jimenez could be a guy that can get outs, and that could be the bridge from, the starters up until Alex Wilson or Justin Wilson.
Instead of Anibal Sanchez.
Exactly.
Or Kyle Ryan or Shane Green, right, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Those guys, unfortunately, when they're in there, they just, when you look at the stats, they give up runs galore. They give up hits. There's constantly runners on base, and nobody has confidence in them. You see a situation where, they're lucky to be 10-8 with that bullpen. They really are lucky. And I understand your scenario in that you're saying the Tigers need to not really have a stated closer, just utilize matchups and look at advanced sabermetrics. And so lay it on me one more time in terms of your thesis regarding the closer situation, in that it just should be a situation where Ausmus looks at the numbers and looks at the matchup and who's available, and not use a set routine is what you're saying.
Yeah, no set routine. Use the most effective relief pitcher in high leverage situations based on matchups typically, and that will solve the equation for using the bullpen in late inning situations. I think that will be the most effective, most productive way of doing so for Brad Ausmus. And to keep his job past this season, I think that would be the best way for him to do so as well.
How much credit do you give the Tigers for that series win versus Minnesota? I mean, you get Jose Iglesias getting rocked in the face. I mean, basically, that was a brutal game. What a tough way to lose. In that, K-Rod came in, struggled a little bit, but he got the inning double play. They just weren't able to convert it, and then Iglesias gets kicked in the face, and now he's on the DL. You have a situation where Miguel Cabrera is on the DL. You had a struggling Victor Martinez up until his breakout game versus Minnesota, and you look at it and you go, hey, they still went to Minnesota and won 2 out of 3 games, and they've still, up until this point in the season, only lost 1 complete series, and they sit with 10 wins and 8 losses. You give them credit for that nice performance versus the Minnesota Twins, a division rival, a team that started the year pretty well. You go into their house after the Twins came to Detroit and you won the series there. You go into their house and take care of business. I like the start in terms of divisional play that the Tigers are showing early on in 2017.
Well, you know what? The Tigers being 10-8, I think, is a little bit surprising as well. But it's a reason why these fans that are, doomsday fans kind of jumping off the bandwagon already should not be, because look at it this way. Cabrera on the DL. JD Martinez on the DL. Jose Iglesias, as you noted, on the DL to start the season too. Or at least has had it go on the DL since the season started. With those 3 names, those are 3 bigger names that make up the Tigers lineup. 3 of the biggest names in the Tigers' everyday lineup. So with that being said, Doc, it is a reason actually, in retrospect, to be optimistic about the Tigers' fortunes going forward. That they are 10-8 without those big bats in their lineup right now. And with guys like Jim Adduci, who the hell is Jim Adduci? We got a doozy, though, from Jim Adduci on Sunday against the Twins. Remember that? John Hicks, how about him? Playing first base right now, a guy that's been a backup catcher before for the Mariners, was in AAA Toledo, was killing the ball. They called him up to replace Miguel Cabrera. Hicks is up now. He is hitting so far. Now, Romine has slowed down, but Avila's still hitting. Avila's hitting. You have Hicks hitting. You have Adduci hitting. Now, in small sample sizes, but if those guys continue to hit, and then you get JD Martinez back in May, Miguel Cabrera back, Jose Iglesias back, all those regulars back, you've got to be actually optimistic and pretty happy about where they are right now, with that being said, and where they can be and where they are headed going forward this season.
I guess many people are looking at it and going, should the Tigers platoon the catcher situation? Because James McCann can't hit right-handed batters. It's unbelievable the lack of success that he has. And so what you've seen, and the pattern has revealed itself, is that when there's a right-handed pitcher, you have a left-handed bat in Alex Avila, and he's kind of earning his way to get a couple more starts versus right-handed starting pitchers from the opponents, because he's mashing. I think he's got, 3, 4 home runs to start the year, and it's very helpful to have that extra power that Alex Avila is bringing to the table, because McCann against right-handed isn't performing at the level where you would expect. So do you think about platooning the catcher situation? Is that advantageous for the Tigers to consider?
It's not advantageous long-term this season, but Avila is a very nice backup, a nice lefty complement to James McCann behind home plate. So I would say he's a worthwhile backup that can sustain some level of success going forward this season as a backup catcher, Avila that is, but actually setting up a real platoon between him and then James McCann at catcher, I don't think that's a sustainable model of success for the Tigers heading later into the season, because I don't think Avila will keep up the production at the plate. So because of that, you don't really want Avila to take too many reps and to get overexposed, in so many words, because of his age and his injury past too, Doc.
Okay, I see your point, but what is it going to take for McCann to turn it around? His offense against, the opponents with right-handed pitchers is not very good, and I understand he brings a lot of good things to the defense, but don't you think with the combination of Alex Avila calling a better game, his rapport with Daniel Norris, and the fact that he knows a lot of these starters, doesn't it give him an advantage to maybe throw him out there a couple more times to see if he can ride this hot streak? Maybe not overall call it a platoon officially, but don't you think then Alex Avila needs a couple more starts to see if his hot bat can stay hot?
Well, then you can also, though, be the contrarian and say, well, you don't want to overexpose Avila once again, because he is off to a hot start, but save him for the few at-bats that he gets every week and don't play him too often to the point where then he does maybe get taken down by an injury or just succumbs to overexposure once again for playing too much in a given week. You don't want that to happen to Avila at this juncture in his career. And McCann does bring the McCann effect, the quality arm with his ability to throw out runners, trying to steal bases on him. McCann is very good at that as an elite, really, catcher in terms of throwing out runners. And you also know he brings some power. He has some pop in his bat. So right now, how they have deployed McCann, how they have deployed Avila, I like actually out of Brad Ausmus, and I wouldn't mind if it continues going forward. But if the injury to Cabrera is more severe than we thought or lingers on and on, which maybe it could, and maybe it could with Cabrera because of his advanced age now. If it does, you might want to give Avila more reps at first base, because you have to believe that John Hicks, being really a career journeyman and minor leaguer for the most part, or a guy that hasn't been a very productive major leaguer when he has been in the majors. With that being said, that more than likely he's going to succumb to a slump at some point and not continue at this rapid rate that he has hit at thus far this season since being called up from AAA. Which means you might want to give Avila a few more at-bats to, keep Hicks on the bench more often as the season progresses. And that would come into play if Cabrera's injury is more severe, or if once he returns from the DL, if it becomes a lingering issue, something that comes up once again at some point in the season. If it does for Cabby and he has to be shut down once again, then you might have to truly consider playing Avila much more often, and at first base specifically, because Hicks, you can't once again expect him to continue his rapid production at the plate, or premium production at the plate, Doc.
All right, Vito, let's take a quick timeout, come back, regroup. We have to talk about Matthew Boyd and the retaliation that he did throwing at Miguel Sano, and it was a great situation in that right then and there on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, when Jacoby Jones got destroyed, when his face exploded off of that fastball that was thrown at him, I thought that there was going to be some retaliation, and the Twins had thrown at several Tigers earlier this year, and they got pissed. The Tigers retaliated, and I want to get your sense of, was it the right time? Was it the wrong time? The Tigers did end up winning the game, but it was a situation where there could have been some things that went wrong. So I'm very curious to get your thoughts, and we'll talk about it next on Tigers Talk.
Was there intent? Was Boyd being evil? We will dive into that very matter, as you said, Doc, after this quick commercial break on episode number 88 of Tigers Talk.
Doc here. I want to tell you about our host site, Podomatic. If you go to Podomatic.com, it's a user-friendly podcast hosting site that allows us here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network to put up all the audio content quickly. Guys like Vito, Adam, Jason, Jerry Mallory, myself, we can put up podcasts really quickly because of the user-friendly platform of Podomatic. Go visit Podomatic.com. If you're just starting up a new podcast, I know there's several out there. I know some people use SoundCloud, they use Podbean, But the reason why Podomatic is so successful is it's user-friendly. You can put up a podcast super quick. You can really find advanced stats as to who's listening to your podcast, when, where, daily downloads, whether it's coming from mobile, from a desktop. They have great statistics and reporting. And for podcasting, it helps you to realize how your audience is receiving your product. I can't say enough nice things about Podomatic. We've been working with them since 2013, and they're very user-friendly. They help us out quite a bit. And Vito, I've uploaded around 600 podcasts at this point in time with Podomatic exclusively. And the reason why I use them, user-friendly, quick, and they're very helpful. And if you ever experience any problems, very user-friendly, shoot them an email and the help desk will respond within 24 hours to solve your problems. I've never experienced a significant problem with Podomatic because they're very user-friendly and they're focused on making sure that your content is delivered. I mean, Vito, shoot. I upload a podcast and boom, right away, I don't have to worry about iTunes. It's uploaded right away. And Podomatic makes it happen. And so if you're starting up a podcast, no better place to check out than Podomatic.com.
And back here on episode number 88 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company after that great commercial spot from Doc as usual about Podomatic and our other outlets and formats for listening to the podcast and downloading our podcast and other ones under this Detroit Sports Podcast Network umbrella. And,
That's right.
That is absolutely right, baby. And also what is absolutely right is that there may have been intent from Matthew Boyd when he threw behind Miguel Sano, this great now hitter for the Twins, perhaps their best hitter, and a guy that can produce the power numbers. And we have to dive in, though, to the topic of whether or not there truly was the intent from, as he is now known, as Matthew Boyd. No longer Matt. We got to call him by that formal first name, Matthew Boyd. And was there that true intent? In your opinion, Doc, when you were watching the game this past weekend against the Twinkies, when you saw that happen, do you think there was that intent involved for Matthew Boyd?
My initial thought was, yeah, there was intent. I was a little bit disappointed in that when it happened, I had asked on our Twitter page, should the Tigers seek retribution and who should do it? Many people felt like maybe at that time in such a close game that it wasn't the right time to do it. But when I first saw it, I really thought that he really did throw at Sano.
And the thing is now, so as we know, Jacoby Jones was hit in the face by a pitch in the third inning. It was an ugly scene. He was bleeding, ugly, horrible to look at, and you feel bad for Jacoby and what happened there against the Twins. And then, though, 2 innings later was when Boyd threw behind Sano. And Sano is a fiery guy, and I think the moment overtook Matthew Boyd emotionally. It got the best of him, and I think there was truly intent. There was retribution. And I would say a noteworthy or worthy a reason to retaliate for what happened to Jacoby Jones.
Now, Vito, let's listen to a couple audio clips from that day. This is from MLB.com, and then we'll go to Fox Sports Detroit, and they asked Matthew Boyd about the situation. So we'll play these couple clips, and we'll get some more context regarding the day that happened.
And the big man throws a punch at McCann. Here come the benches. Paul Molitor in the middle of it.
You knew that was retaliation.
Well, there's McCann who put his glove in his face.
Right.
That
right.
I didn't see.
Yeah, he put his glove in his face first.
But does it give you the reason to punch McCann? Now, McCann put his mitt in the face of Sano, like the announcer said there during that clip. Thing is, he was intervening to be the guy that was silencing the bench clearing brawl, to kind of curtail it, right? To minimize it. But
I
then
think
Sano
all parties,
punches him. Come on.
All parties involved, I think, handled it appropriately. Sano, no.
Oh, he didn't handle it appropriately. Punching McCann.
Listen,
he should have known. McCann, what was he trying to do? He was trying to just end the argument and not to allow it to spiral out of control as it did because of Sano's actions, largely.
Vito, in the heat of the battle, you're thinking about the way you act in your car driving behind me, acting a fool. At that moment, the first thought that Sano was thinking is, damn, he called a pitch to get my ass thrown at. So he's thinking that McCann is implicit and involved in the decision.
You think? It was all about Boyd. Go after. Now, he wanted to punch Boyd. We know
Vito,
McCann was the good peacemaker that came in the middle of them.
Vito,
he was the peacemaker, Doc.
If, though, the plan was to throw at Sano, then McCann knows about it, right? He knows that the pitch is going to be astray because the catcher is the guy that knows exactly where the pitch is going to be located and what type of pitch it is. So Sano's not thinking, oh, James McCann has the great intention.
He's a peacemaker. He's a good guy trying to break it up, my man. I think there's instances where the catcher doesn't even know about the pitch that's coming, that there is retaliation coming, and a pitch that's going to be thrown behind, the batter that's up to bat at that point in the game. I don't know if you can say that McCann totally was cognizant of that going to happen.
Really?
I don't know. He might not have known that was going to happen. He probably didn't call for that. But we don't know. I'm speculating, but so are you, aren't you?
So.
Are we both speculative right now about what went down, whether or not McCann really knew about that pitch before it was thrown by Matthew Boyd behind Miguel Sano?
Oh, I don't think so.
I think you're totally wrong, Vito.
You think so? You think McCann totally knew going into that?
I think he knew. And I think Matthew Boyd handled all the questions professionally. But when you look at it, after what Jacoby Jones did and the nature of the pitch, I don't think he just yanked it. I think it was intentional. He definitely threw at Sano, and it was a situation that played out as it should have. The bullpens came out, they tussled a little bit, and then it ended. When you look at it strategically, I think it was the right move because Sano was ejected. And obviously later in the game, there was a situation where he would have batted last when the Tigers got the final out. So if you trade Matthew Boyd for Sano, I think that when you look at it overall, it was the right decision to do. Now for me, when I was looking at it at first, I was like, "Ooh, when the Tigers have that bullpen in such a close game, I don't want to go to the bullpen at all." Boyd was pitching pretty well; he was effective, and so my thinking was though he would just get warned. But knowing how it all played out, for him to be ejected was kind of a bogus call. I thought that everybody should have been warned, but if it was going to play out Boyd for Sano, you could take that 9 times out of 10, especially since the Tigers won the game. Now, had the Tigers lost the game, I probably would be telling you a different story, thinking that, of course, that wasn't the right thing to do. You could have did it on the following game Sunday when you had a huge lead. You could have started plunking multiple guys. But in essence, they won the game. Boyd handled himself, and I think it was a rallying cry to say, hey, I got your back. Him and McCann kind of earned respect in that clubhouse for doing what they did.
McCann already had it, I think. I think he's been a great clubhouse leader, voice since day one, since he has been a big leaguer in a Tigers uniform, that is, specifically. Now, I wanted to say this, too. I don't know if there was strategy involved, but you could argue that Miguel Sano, based on his numbers up to this point, has been the most productive slugger for the Twins up to this point this season. So you got him thrown out of the ball game, and since that incident, which Major League Baseball labeled as aggressive actions from Sano, now they have suspended and fined Miguel Sano. So one game he got suspended for and fined as well for those actions in that bench clearing brawl on Saturday, in which the Tigers won only 5-4. So think about it. In retrospect, what if that would have cost the Tigers because Boyd was gone? They had to go to the bullpen. What if the bullpen would have blown that game? It could have happened. So as much strategy as there may have been involved, which I don't believe there was strategy, it was just pure retribution. And I'm going to say this really quick, because there probably wasn't true strategy and trying to get Sano thrown out for him then coming after Boyd and throwing that punch at McCann, nobody knew he was going to react in that way. Now, maybe they a little bit did because they maybe know he has been a fiery ball player in the past, but you don't know he's going to react in that manner. So there was a chance where Sano wasn't going to be thrown out. So you do that in a close ball game that you want to win. And that's where I've got to put my foot down and say, no need for that, and don't do that ever again in a close ball game. Not when the game's potentially on the line. Now, on Sunday, as you noted, when the game's far out of reach, where the Tigers are far ahead, and they're going to win the game. You knew that on Sunday. Well, okay, maybe then, if you want to have some retribution, you go and take care of that retribution on Sunday in that blowout game, as you were talking about, Doc. I didn't like it in Saturday's game, when there was a chance the Tigers weren't going to win that ball game.
So let's listen to the comments of Matthew Boyd post-game following the victory versus the Minnesota Twins, and let's see what we can surmise.
What was the explanation that you were given for getting tossed?
He just came up and told me I was tossed. So yeah.
Surprised? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised. I was really surprised.
What did he say to you, and what did you say back?
Sano?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. James got in there and didn't let him come in, close. But yeah.
Seemed to have a pretty short fuse on that, though. I mean, I know guys don't like balls going behind them, but he just seemed to snap. Any reason why that you can point to?
I don't know. I'd have to ask him.
Who's It was a strange day for you command-wise. What were you fighting?
I just was a little bit out of sync early on, and then after that second inning, felt like we made the adjustment just mechanically, and felt really good after that, actually. I mean, as good as you can after whatever, the whole situation, walking guys and all, but just unfortunate day ended short. But, guys behind me did a great job, and, man, our bullpen came in, slammed the door shut, and we fought back. We got some runs there, and that was a good team win.
How scary was that to see Jacoby get hit?
It's horrifying. Right when you see him get hit and you see red on his face, you just start praying right away. I'm praying for him, and, hopefully all will be good.
And now, you know what? I don't get why he threw at Sano. It was 2 innings later after that incident with Jacoby Jones. Why was it 2 innings later as well? A little bit suspicious, and that's why maybe you could say, too, that Boyd deserved only a warning and not to be ejected as he was right after throwing that ball behind Miguel Sano. And the other thing is, too, really quick, Doc, is you look at his erraticness, his ineffectiveness with throwing strikes or with, to this point, walking batters, and too often thus far. He has walked now 11 guys in 18 and 2/3 innings pitched, in 18 and 2/3 innings. Think about that. 11 walks in that amount of innings is not a very good ratio. And when you look at the fact, too, that his strikeout to base on ball ratio is 14-11. That's not very good. And that's why his walks and hits per innings pitched, his whip, that is 1.55 to this point. Whenever it's that high, your whip, you know you're not being that effective. Even though his fielding independent pitching right now is below 4 at 3.88. So that's solid. And it pretty much, it measures up with or matches his ERA, almost absolutely does. As his ERA right now is 3.86, the FIP once again is 3.88. So he's been all right to this point, and whenever your ERA, your FIP is below 4, you know you're doing something right, but still the walks to this point, a little bit too high for my liking, and that scares me going forward for Matthew Boyd, a guy that has been effective at throwing strikes in the past and at limiting base on balls, and he hasn't to this point. That's my point, Doc.
What are you
Matthew
doing?
Boyd.
What are you doing?
Exactly. That's what we could say with Justin Verlander as well, because his start was unbelievable. His last appearance, it was going well, and then it just fell out. And when pitchers struggle, you realize that walks are killer for any pitcher, and especially for the Detroit Tigers. So I guess we'll agree to disagree in that you feel like it was not intentional. I feel like it was planned, it was called, and it was probably executed in the best way for the Tigers, and that you don't hit Sano, and it kind of looks like an errant pitch, which you can then explain away. But I think all in all, the umpires maybe overreacted because of the reaction of Sano. I think that they could have cleared the air, given everybody warnings, and handled it better. But you just throw him out there and eject him from the game, it really put the Tigers in a pinch. But like Boyd said, they were able to come in, shut the door, and get the victory, which resulted in a series victory when they destroyed Minnesota the following Sunday. So it was awesome.
For me, Matt Boyd, though, in the future, throw strikes. Worry about throwing strikes, okay? Because that, I know that was probably intentional. I'll admit it, actually. It probably was intentional. I get it. But the thing is, you know what? Throw strikes, because I don't want to see you being erratic at all, because you've been a guy so far that has walked too many batters. So you doing that, unless you're a consistent strike thrower, and we're up to this point, and weren't allowing walks at the rate that you have up to this point, you know, unless you had those two things going for you, unless you did, then you're not going to do what he did there and trying to get retribution for Jacoby Jones. I don't think it was, in so many words, I don't think it was worthwhile. That's my point. Don't think it was worth it for him to do that, because it was a tight ball game that wasn't clearly decided at that point.
You're a terrible liar.
Wait, Vito, so you're saying you started off thinking he did not throw at him? Then because of my argument?
I still think it's, but I think this is my point too. 2 innings later? Why 2 innings later? I get why you maybe did it against Sano. You might have wanted to get him thrown out. Thing is, you got thrown out too. So, and that was your strategy. You also got thrown out, and you haven't been an effective strike thrower or a guy that's been able to limit the walks up to this point either. In the 18 and 2/3 innings that you've pitched up to this point.
I think you're thinking one step too far. I believe that the intention was to throw behind him to send a message to the rest of the Twins and the pitchers to stop throwing at our guys, and it's retribution because Jacoby Jones got rocked. Now, it's not like Jacoby Jones gets hit in the back or in the ass and just walks to first base and he's okay. You destroyed his face. He was bleeding all over the place. You see the picture of the mouth? Did you see the blood? Did you see all that?
It was ugly to look at. It was a very bad image.
So you send a message to the opponent. That's why it's baseball code to, hey, if you're going to go out there and start, it wasn't the first time, too. Jacoby Jones wasn't the first batter that was hit. So it starts to become a trend, and over the course of a long season, you cannot take stuff from your opponent. So if they're going to give you some gruff, you're going to throw back at them, and I think the Tigers handled it in the classiest way possible. Now, Boyd didn't plunk him in the head. He didn't plunk him. He missed completely. And so his intention was not to get Sano ejected. His intention was to send a message to say, hey, knock this crap off. We're going to, if you're going to throw at us, you're going to get the baseball code retaliation, and that's how it should have went.
So there goes your strategy right down the drain then. You said the strategy maybe was to get Sano thrown out. You just said, you contradicted yourself. You said, well, by them throwing behind him, not plunking him, that there was no strategy, that they didn't want to get him thrown out or didn't think that would happen, or they didn't care about that.
But after the fact, when you evaluate it, you say, hey,
well, yeah,
Boyd
hindsight 2020, right? If we're doing Jerry Mallory's podcast and talking about hindsight 2020, we might say, yeah, you take that because Sano got thrown out. But in the grand scheme of things, I would say to Matthew Boyd, don't do that again this season, or at least until you start throwing strikes more consistently, and stop walking batters at as high of a rate as you have up to this point, which is too high, Doc.
You know what happens when you confront me?
You are the Spalding Gray of crap.
All right, Vito, it was a good podcast. Now, I want to tell everybody to go check out your work at freep.com, where you go and you extensively preview the Tigers series versus the Seattle Mariners. Give us the highlights. Go to freep.com to check out Vito Chirco's work. Great stuff.
A 3-game set at Comerica Park, 7:10, 7:10, and then 1:10 on Thursday afternoon for the last game of the series against a Mariners ball club that hasn't pitched very effectively thus far. Outside of James Paxton, who right now looks like their ace based on, well, the stats, King Felix has been effective at times, but now he's got the strikeout to walk ratio at 20-1. That's outstanding, and that's Cy Young caliber. But when you look at his other numbers, such as his FIP, once again, the stat that is known as a fielding independent pitching mark, which is now a tool used to evaluate pitchers much more consistently. When you look at that for King Felix, right now the FIP is at 4.28 through 4 starts. Now, he's going Tuesday against Jordan Zimmerman. You have to like King Felix in that matchup, especially after what you've seen out of Jay Zim. But this is the opportunity at home for Jay Zim to bounce back as well, Tuesday night against the M's. And Hernandez will be followed in the M's rotation by the aforementioned James Paxton, a guy that's been outstanding out of the gate. He sports a career 3.86 ERA in 3 career outings against Detroit. And a veteran right-hander, Hisashi Iwakuma, he sports a 3.47 mark in 8 career games, including 7 starts against Detroit. So all 3 guys pitching against the Tigers in this series have had quality outings in the past against the Tigers and very strong numbers. To sum it all up as well, the Mariners, though, as a ball club up to this point, haven't pitched very well, and their record shows that, as they haven't done very well out of the gate, standing at 8-12 overall.
All right, sir, it's that time of the podcast where we give our weekly awards, the Toast of the Town and the Buster of the Week. Go for it.
Well, I would have to say right now, Doc, the Buster of the Week, and I gave a little bit more thought to this, I would say might have to be Justin Verlander. Have I been really hard on him? I haven't, but he has kind of stunk it up in recent memory. Outside of him, who else could you say is worthy of that? Well, for the whole entire season, the entirety of the season, you could say Francisco Rodriguez as well is worthy of that very award. In terms of Toast of the Town, you have to like what you've seen out of, I would say, what you've seen out of Justin Upton to this point. Alex Avila still. Also John Hicks. I think John Hicks is worthy of that Toast of the Town. How about a career minor leaguer, pretty much? Career backup, playing first base now, out of nowhere, because of Miguel Cabrera going on the shelf. Now you have him playing first base, and he's hit up to this point. So actually, for Toast of the Town, I think it's a very easy selection for me this week. It is Mr. John Hicks. And you have to give it to him now, because guess what? He might endure a slump and might not be worthy of that Toast of the Town ever again this season.
No doubt about it.
Doc, how about you?
Buster of the Week, I probably will give it to Anibal Sanchez. Unfortunately, his time is up. I know we've given him the award quite a bit, but unfortunately, when you look at his performances, they just aren't up to snuff, and it's not high quality. He probably should be DFA'd, but unfortunately, due to his contract, he'll still be on the roster. Now, the Toast of the Town, I'm going to give it to Victor Martinez for breaking through that slump, and I'm hoping that once he gets a chance to get the award from the Doc and the DSP network, he can continue his hitting, because you can see the difference when Victor Martinez is contributing. So I know it's just a one-game outburst that he had where he performed well, but hey, more than enough for this week because we need him to break out of that slump and contribute offensively. His hitting will help out due to the significant loss of Miguel Cabrera, who's going to be out anywhere from 8 to 10 games with his back situation. So V-Mart has to pick it up. Upton has to pick it up. And, if you get contributions from the likes of McCann and Nicholas Castellanos, hey, continued success for those guys, the role players per se, and that'll help the Tigers continue to win series and stay atop the AL Central.
More and more extra base hits, though, out of Victor Martinez this season. I don't see that happening on a regular basis. I'm very scared of him being able to produce extra base hits on a regular basis. Now, moving on from that really quick to sum up everything and to end this podcast, Doc, how about now against the Mariners, a 3-game set, as I already mentioned. I already previewed the series. But now, how many games do you see them taking against the Seattle Mariners? I'm going to say 2 out of 3 in this series.
I'm on board. 2 out of 3 win the series.
2 out of 3, and just like that, we're out of here on episode number 88 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again for next week's episode, which will be episode 89.
Before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you and the network.
Always can find me on Twitter at Vito Jerome, the podcast network on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, and the website is DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Thank you much, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.